Greetings, everybody. This is your favorite speaker, Dr. Ronald Brown, Ron Brown, and this is another program in this series on religions and the world. So far, we've been talking about various religions, past, the present, but with special emphasis on the 21st century. As I'm speaking, we are in the last days of the year 2020. Pretty soon it's going to be 2021, and we will be well into the 21st century. And, to be a bit dramatic, the third millennium. What is going to be the role of religion in the age of space travel? Settlements, cities, civilizations on the moon. When we get to the point where the human intelligence and consciousness can be uploaded into a computer. One of my favorite movies is The Lawnmower Man, where he escapes what people call this human bag of protein and water, and we can have the freedom to search the universe as an electrical digit in a computer, as a memory stick. I often think of myself traveling around the world as I do, that wouldn't it be so great just to be able to upload myself into a computer and email myself to Mars. And within a minute, I would be up there. I would be either in a mechanical body with eyes and ears and giving me all kinds of the sense stimulation, or just choose another specially designed physical body, which would survive and thrive in the Martian landscape, the Martian atmosphere, temperature, and what else. So how are religions going to adapt to the future? And as we all know, there are more religions in the garbage can of human history than there are on the face of the earth today. Think of all those millions of people, hundreds of millions of people who worship the gods of the Celts, of the Germanic tribes, of the Aztecs, the Mayas. Think of all the people who worship the gods of the Greeks and Romans. I mean, these religions, nobody even remembers them except Saturday, which is the day of Saturn. Friday is named after the Germanic god Freya. Wednesday, of course, is Wotan's day. Thursday is Thor. Sunday is the god of the sun. Monday is the god of the moon, or the goddess of the moon. So we're looking into the future. Well, our topic for today is Islam. And as usual, here is the outline. The founder, very important in understanding any religious movement. Who founded it? What was the personality of Jesus, or of Abraham, or of Moses, or of Confucius, or of the Buddha? The Quran, the book. Now, both the Quran, the book, and the founder are what I call universal building blocks of religion. Every religion has a founder. Every religion has a book. And sometimes the building block of founder or Quran is huge, as in Christianity and Confucius and Buddhism. Sometimes it's not so big. For example, Hinduism does not claim to have a single founder, although it has a string of great determining figures. Third is Ramadan, the importance of another universal building block of religions, holidays, Arabic language, sacred language, and then the Islamic approach to the state, government, central to understanding Islam. Sharia, the laws of a civilization. Islam is not just a religion of Friday night and Saturday going to the mosque, but it is the basis of a civilization with laws and government and everything else. Then the famous 5 pillars of Islam, what distinguishes Islam, essential, accepted by all Muslims. and then the Islamic world today and the Islamic world tomorrow. So let's get going on our visit to the Islamic world. Now, once again, this is a review of the essential, or what I call the universal building blocks of Islam and the universal building blocks of all religions. Founder, of course, the Prophet Muhammad. The book, the Quran. Holiday, Ramadan. Holy language, Arabic. The importance of the state, law codes, regulating daily life, prayer, food, fasting, pilgrimage, and the holy city of Mecca. So these are 10 universal building blocks of Islam, which are also universal building blocks of all religion in one way or the other. I was talking to a minister friend of mine, and I was talking about sacred language, and he said, "Oh, Christianity doesn't have a sacred language. You pray in whatever religion, in whatever language you want, wherever you live. The Bible is easily translated." And I said, "Yes, but look at the Pentecostal movement and the sudden reemergence of a sacred language, speaking in tongues." So something that Martin Luther had basically gotten rid of with Latin and Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic and the other sacred languages, said translated into the language of the people. But suddenly, the universal building block of holy language, sacred language, came roaring back in the United States, in places like Los Angeles and the inner urban immigrant neighborhoods, and speaking in tongues reemerged to be a major building block in the Pentecostal movement. So let's get started. Number one, the founder. The founder of every religious movement is extremely important. Think of the posters you see. What would Jesus do? Even Christians say, how would Jesus handle this situation? Or we look to what Brigham Young and Joseph Smith did when they were founding the Mormons, major figures, two founding figures in this brand new religion called the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Or think of Reverend Moon, the founder of the Unification Movement, stamping his personality on a whole new religious movement. And our topic for today, the Prophet Muhammad. Now, unlike Abraham and Moses, and even to an extent, Jesus, the Buddha, and Confucius, we know a lot about the Prophet Muhammad because he was born in the year 570, died in the year 632. He was born in a world where people were civilized. They were writing books. Of course, there were wars and everything else, but it is the modern era. And so the Prophet Muhammad was noticed as he was starting this new religion. The Christians were alarmed at this rise of a new religion in faraway Rome and Paris. They were already concerned about this new figure in Persia and India. The emergence of this new prophet was noted. Now, of course, there wasn't CNN and the New York Times, but people observed it. Now, Jesus, we only know from the Bible, and the Romans really didn't pay much attention. He was just another rabble rouser. And with Abraham, we don't even know if he existed or not, or as his name implies, he was just a great ancestor. But the Prophet Muhammad, we know a lot. Now, look at these pictures. On the left, we see one which is very typical in the Shiite world, Iran, which is allowed to represent figures, human beings in artwork such as this. The Sunni traditional approach to images is you do not show the face. You do not have statues or paintings or pictures of people. These are considered graven images, similar to the Jews, where you don't represent humans in either statues or mosaics or paintings. Now, what was the world of the Prophet Muhammad? Well, in the ancient world, there were great civilizations. For example, we see on the left, the Egyptian civilization at its high point, going the whole way down the Nile to Nubia, modern day Sudan, and even influencing the ancient civilizations of Ethiopia, and expanding up through the land of Canaan, modern day Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and up into modern day Turkey. So you had a great ancient civilization in Egypt. You had another ancient great civilization in Babylon, today modern day Iraq. And we see Mesopotamia, Assyria, and whenever Babylon would get powerful, it too would expand up into Iraq, Lebanon, Turkey, down into the land of Canaan, and later Israel, Palestine, even down into northern Arabia, sometimes even invading Egypt itself. So you had a world of great civilizations scattered around the world at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. You had the great Persian Empire, which once again, when it expanded up, taking over Babylon, even going up and invading what is today Turkey and Greece and Egypt. And so you had another great empire flourishing in the Middle East. Well, Alexander the Great came surging out of Macedonia and spreading Greek culture down into Egypt, where he established the brand new city of Alexandria, and expanding over to the border with India, once again spreading Greek culture. So we could say that the world that the Prophet Muhammad inherited was a world of great empires, rising, falling, leaving behind monumental architecture, pyramids, Greek temples, Persian Zoroastrian temples, Babylonian hanging gardens, even Israel, with its two brief empires in the land of Canaan, building Jerusalem, Solomon's temple, and even expanding up from Egypt up into the border with Babylon. So the world, you could say, of the Middle East or the Prophet Muhammad was a world awash with great civilizations. Rome emerged and conquered everything from Britain down to the borders of Arabia and Persia. Well, by the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the Roman Empire was a bit in decline, but it managed to keep hold of what we call the Byzantium Empire, based in Constantinople, which included Greece and Balkans, modern day Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, down into Egypt, even at times expanding over to North Africa and Italy. But clearly, the Roman and the Byzantine Empire were on their decline when the Prophet Muhammad entered the world. So, for centuries, and especially the Prophet Muhammad was traumatized by how is it possible that everybody and his mother was building a great empire, literature, architecture, great wars, philosophers, great religious movements, and the Arabs were down in the Arabian Peninsula, sort of there for the looting by the Egyptians or the Persians or the Greeks or the Romans. So the Arabs were really suffering from an inferiority complex at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. Why is it that everybody in the Middle East has an empire except us? Well, the Arabs in the what is today modern day Saudi Arabia were didn't really have much to offer. The southern part, whereas today modern day Yemen, there were some large cities and they had some civilizations. There were trade routes that went through Arabia, but they were a bunch of wild tribes too busy fighting each other to develop a great language or culture or civilization. The distances were too great for them to even conquer each other and create an empire. So it was sort of the forgotten corner of the Middle East that nobody was really very interested in. We can see from this map the various tribes. Banu is simply means in Arabic the children or the descendants of, for example, right in the middle you see Banu Kilab, which would be the descendants of a person named Kilab. Just as the Jews consider themselves the Banu Abraham, the children of Abraham. So it was a tribal society. And you can see the big central area called the Forbidden Zone was so arid and so hot that life could not exist. So you had a band along the coast of the Red Sea where you had some cities and you had some civilized areas. And down at the bottom, you had what is modern day Yemen, where you did have a number of cities, but nobody was really very interested. They didn't have much gold or anything of importance. They were too busy fighting and killing each other to get around to uniting and building a great civilization. In the South, you had civilizations. For example, in Africa, you see Aksum. That was the origin of the Ethiopian civilization. So by the time the Prophet Muhammad came into the picture in the year in 5 and 600s of the Western calendar, Ethiopia had already expanded from Aksum, taking over a big area, and what the country which we call Christian Ethiopia was already there. Across in modern day southern Yemen, we see other civilizations which emerged. Some of them were a mixture of Arab pagans worshiping their gods. There were various kinds of Christians in that area. Now, of course, they weren't Methodists and Baptists that we know today and Roman Catholics. There were various, what we would call heretics. Ethiopian Christians would go across with missionaries. Greeks would come down, various Eastern churches, such as the Arameans and other churches of the Middle East, which were independent of both the Roman Catholics and the Greek Orthodox. Various heretics, Christian bishops would declare their independence and set off to create their own church. There were many Jews in this area. Now, of course, there were various kinds of Jews at that time. The temple had been destroyed in 70 AD, and the Jewish refugees scattered all over. Some of them would settle somewhere and try to recreate what they had back in Jerusalem and Egypt, for example. They built temples and they had priests and were sacrificing animals. So some of the Jews were still keeping alive the old traditions. Others adopted what had started emerging already in 70 AD as a synagogue, where rather than sacrificing animals, they would have educated Jews who could read the old books and carry on some type of religious services. So Arabia was not only neglected by the major empires of the world, but it was a crossroads of the religions of Persia, Zoroastrianism, the early Christians from Egypt and Ethiopia and the Middle East. various Jewish sects which had gone down there and staked out little kingdoms. Sometimes they'd unite, force conversion to either the Ethiopian Christianity or the Judaism of one tribe or the other. Wars were waged. So Arabia was awash with religious movements, cultural influences from all of its superpower neighbors. In fact, you could say that Arabia was a battlefield of armies and missionaries. Whenever Egypt was strong, it would try to take over the towns and the cities of Arabia. The Greeks would come down, the Persians would occupy it, taking whatever they had. Missionaries, of course, were out in the 600s. It was a vicious time of competition between Jewish missionaries from the various Christian churches of Egypt, Ethiopia, the Greeks, Aramaeans, and other ones. And so it was very much like New York is today. Every street corner has a preacher. Little churches, self-proclaimed independent preachers emerge, stake out a church. Jewish groups were all over the place, everything from Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn, Orthodox Jews, New Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Jews for Jesus. I mean, everybody was in the field competing for converts and empires competing for land. You had the famous Jewish king, Abu Qarib Asad Toban, who seized power in a big chunk of Saudi Arabia, forced the people to convert to Judaism, but was then overthrown. Coptic Christians in Aksum, up in Egypt, we had the Ethiopians and the Egyptian Christians, each proclaiming their form of Christianity as the only form, sending out missionaries. Assyrian Christians in Iraq, Byzantine sent down Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Christians, Persian Zoroastrians, and of course you had a plethora of tribal Arab kings and gods. Every tribe claimed to be Banu something, the descendants of some great ancestor. Well, as we know, Prophet Muhammad was part of this world. He was a son of travelers and traders. Now, here we don't know too much about his upbringing. His parents died, he was adopted by relatives, and we don't really have a lot of records. He was not from an extremely important family, but from a significant tribe. It is believed that he, as a young guy, was sent off on trading caravans, most possibly up to modern day Syria and Iraq and Palestine, Israel, maybe even over to Egypt. We don't know. But he was exposed to all of the competing religious movements of the times. Well, he was curious. Like me, whenever he sees a house of worship and the door is open, I go in. I think if they don't want me, they'll kick me out. And he was very much the same. He even mentions that he would meet with Christian missionaries of all the different sects and cults, the Jewish leaders of all the different Jewish movements, and even hang out with the pagan Arab soothsayers and magicians, and was willing to talk to anybody. Well, according to Islamic teaching, all these influences came together beginning in 609 when he claimed that he began having a series of revelations from God through the angel Gabriel. And these were revealed to him in bits and pieces, and he memorized them, wrote them down, And from 609 to 632, he was constantly receiving revelations. And gradually, through these revelations, a new religious movement started taking shape. This shape was already evident in the early revelations. For example, no statues. Now, this was a rejection of the statues and sacred pillars of the Arab tribes. It was a rejection of the other religions, such as Christianity, which had no problem with statues and idols and paintings. And so central was the influence here, most likely of Judaism, which opposed idols and statues. Also, animal sacrifices, which was still practiced by many Jews and by pagans, was rejected as barbaric. And here again, this would be the influence of probably Christians and Judaism, which the Christians had done away with animal sacrifice and replaced it with a ceremonial drinking of wine and eating of the bread host. Some Jews continued sacrificing animals in their temples, but other Jews had adopted the more modern synagogue type. He also rejected the world of sacraments and magic. And this was very important for Christians, where the priest had the power to magically transform bread and wine into the body and blood of Jesus, whereas the prophet rejected any type of magic or soothsaying or fortune telling. There were no priests. He rejected the Jewish tradition of priesthood and was more influenced by rabbis, where it was simply a person who could read the sacred books, was educated in the sacred books, and could lead prayers and could teach the people. No magic rituals. I mean, there's no no miracles or anything like that. Also, very important, he rejected the Jewish nation of the chosen people or a holy nation in favor of the Christian idea that there is neither Greek nor Roman nor pagan nor any color or any race. That Islam was a missionary religion like Christianity, send missionaries, convert the world. So it was universal as opposed to the tribal Jewish tradition. And it rejected the notion that God had babies with mortal women. Jesus was a prophet. Jesus was not the Son of God. Gods didn't come down and produce hybrid human and divine babies. And so, of course, very important for the Islam was there was only one God. He rejected the three gods of the Christians and was more influenced by the one God of the Jews. He rejected the pantheon of the Arab tribes in favor of one and only one God. So the Quran was basically revealed over 20 some years, and gradually it came into shape as the book that we know it today. Now, central to the revelations was the notion that the Prophet Muhammad really didn't invent anything new. It was simply the completion of a long, thousands of years long revelation, which began between God and the very first prophet, which was Adam. And so Islam believes that God has, for centuries and thousands of years, been shaping humans, instructing humans, giving them a little bit more knowledge with every successive prophet who was called by God, and each one revealed something more, like another chapter. Adam wrote the first chapter, Muhammad wrote the last chapter. Well, a succession of prophets added individual chapters. In the Quran, we see the various prophets. We had Adam, Enoch, and Noah, which were the prophets of the book of the early books of the Jewish tradition. We have others that are pagans. Hud, for example, was an ancient Arab prophet from the Middle East. The Jews continued with Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Jonah, Joseph, David, Solomon. All of the Jewish prophets are mentioned in the Quran. Then came the revelations of John the Baptist and Jesus, Christian prophets, who added still another element. And then finally, the last of the prophets, the culmination was the Prophet Muhammad. Now, Muslims believe that each of these partial revelations were accepted, but then they were distorted. For example, rather than a religion of humanity, the Jews turned it into a tribal religion. Rather than retaining one God, Christians went into error by saying Jesus was the Son of God with a human woman, and the Holy Spirit was thrown in for good measure. And so the Christians sort of went off on their own path to error, just like the Jews had. But finally, the Prophet Muhammad had come to put an end to all these errors, to put everybody back on the right track. And central to the teachings of Muhammad, he was the last. There would be no more. Now, the Quran is one of the universal building blocks of all religions, and it is a holy book. The Jewish Bible, the Torah, the Zoroastrian holy book, the Avesta, sacred book. The Christian Bible, another holy book. The Quran is a holy book. And so in the Quran, we see in chapter 5, we, meaning God, sent down the Torah in which was guidance and light. So the Quran enters into world religions as a book, along with the Gita of Hinduism, the Book of Mormon of the Mormon religion, the writings of Reverend Moon of the Unification Movement. So every religion has a book. Christian Bible. Now, Christians are highly thought of in the Quran. And so we see here that the original Christian Bible was written in Latin, and then it was written in Greek, translated into Latin, translated into Coptic in Egypt, and translated into Ethiopian and Aramaic and all the other languages. And in the Quran, Jesus, and son of Mary, was sent by God, confirming that which came before him in the Torah. We gave him the gospel. And so the gospel was considered a sacred book, as was the Torah for Islam. Now, the revelations continued from the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. And here again, we see a drawing, which is probably Iranian, because the Shiites have no difficulty drawing pictures of angels and the prophet, but they do not have statues. Sunni Muslims are much stricter on that and would blot out the face of both the angel and the Prophet Muhammad, if they would even permit the the bodies to be depicted. The various revelations over this long period of time were written down on scraps of parchment and were gradually collected. Now, for the early revelations, it was an oral tradition. In fact, the Quran simply means to recite, because for centuries the Arabs had no written language, they had various alphabets, and if you're a nomads or a tribal society, you're not going to carry around a bunch of scrolls or anything. And so the oral tradition of memorizing the revelations was very strong. And in fact, it continues today. In a Muslim world, if a kid who's especially gifted has memorized the Quran, he is considered almost a saintly figure, because recitation, memorization is central. I remember when I lived in the Middle East and traveled around Egypt and Turkey and Israel, Jordan, Palestine. I was always impressed if I'd give my phone number or later my email address to somebody, I would just have to recite it and they knew it. Whereas me as a Westerner with no tradition of memorizing things, I would take out a pen and a scrap of paper and write it down. Or if all else failed, I'd write it down on my hand and then transcribe it to a piece of paper. But in the Middle East, they remembered names, phone numbers, email addresses, because they had a tradition of memorizing entire chapters of the Quran. Now, the Quran was very strict, and it really was a detailed blueprint for a new religion. Christianity was messianic, meaning, as Jesus said, I am here, I'll go up to my Father, and I will return. And so the Christians were not instructed on what holidays to celebrate and what to eat, what to wear, or anything, because they expected the end of the world imminently. Whereas Islam was not messianic. They were not expecting the end of the world. They were creating a religion which would last for thousands, if not millions of years. So, of course, holidays were very important. And we see in the Quran, the month of Ramadan is to commemorate the revelation of the Quran, a guidance for mankind, what is right and what is wrong. So, unless you are sick or on a journey, when you can substitute the month of Ramadan for at other dates, the Quran instructed faithful Muslims to fast. Now, here again, this brings up two universal building blocks of religion. One is holiday, and the other one is food. Whether it's the Eucharist of bread and wine, or even something as banal as Christmas cookies or kosher food or halal food and all of that, food is central to every world religion. And even if it is not prescribed in the Christian Bible, well, as we approach Christmas, as I'm talking, stores are filled with Christmas cookies and candy and eggnog. So you can't have a holiday without food. Well, in Ramadan, you fast during the day, but then at sunset, you are allowed to eat. According to the Muslim calendar, we see that it is generally falls in either May or June or about that time. Now, year one for the Islamic calendar is 622, according to our calendar. So there are approximately 622 years difference. So when you see the Gregorian as the year 2014, according to the Muslim calendar, that is 1435. So take 1435, add 622, and you should have the correct year. So you fast until the evening, and then you eat. And here again, oh, you believe fasting is prescribed. It is obligatory to you as it was prescribed to those before you, that ye may learn self-restraint. Well, eating, drinking, of course, are forbidden. But fasting means vomiting purposely. Here again, it was a tradition in ancient Rome to have a big feast and overeat, and then go into what was called a vomitorium, throw up, rinse out your mouth, and go back and eat some more. So during the dinner after the fast, this was forbidden. Also, you refrain from violence, anger, envy, greed, lust, angry or sarcastic retorts, and gossip. All obscene and irreligious sights and sounds are to be avoided, and purity in both thought and action. So this is the central holiday of Islam. Even today, you see at the bottom, the Ramadan Mubarak. Mubarak is a word for happy Ramadan. And people today, influenced by Western society, send cards and greetings and buy gifts for children. At the end of Ramadan, there's Eid al-Fitr, which is the festival of breaking the fast. And it has a lot of characteristics of Christmas. The streets are well lit with lights. Sometimes people will decorate trees or shrubs with decorations featuring Islamic decorations. Food abounds. They invite friends over to celebrate the end of the Ramadan period of fasting. Now, central for Islam is the Arabic language. Arabic really became a major world language only with the rise of Islam, where the alphabet that we see here was organized. The dialect of the Prophet Muhammad and his tribe, Mecca and Medina, became the official classical Arabic. Now, the Arabic language and alphabet are considered central to Islam. As I said earlier, Islam forbids drawing animals or people or statues. But as you can see from the lion on the right, it looks like a lion, but actually it is a passage from the Quran written in a very elegant style. So if you were an Islamic scholar, you'd be able to read what is written there. It's just made to look like an animal, but it's not really an animal. It is a sentence. You have various kinds of script. The one in the upper right is a very squarish, I believe that's called Kufic script. The one in the middle is a more elegant, sort of Turkish influenced script. But calligraphy is used as a form of art, whereas a Catholic church would be filled with statues and mosaics and pictures and candles. All of this is forbidden in a mosque, and so the only decoration would be calligraphy, very similar to a synagogue, where animals and statues are forbidden, but elegantly written Hebrew script would be all over the inside. Here we see at the top a dome with beautiful ornate writing. Around it are geometric forms of circles and squares and triangles. On the right, at the bottom, we see pillars of a building where the decorations are also calligraphy, Arabic written. And on the left, you see how elegant and decorated a text can become, where writing, elegant writing, is considered one of the highest art forms of Islam. Now, for Christians, we don't have that great tradition of elegant writing. We did have it in the Middle Ages, where manuscripts were handwritten and highly illustrated and decorated, whereas today a book is just a functional thing with a couple of pictures. But in Islamic world, the calligraphy is a central piece of art. Of course, the Quran is so sacred that in the United States, when you had the evangelical Christians beginning their crusade against Islam following September 11, it was commonplace to burn the Quran, to desecrate the Quran, recognizing how important it was, how sacred it was. And here again, the book is important. Christians, well, we don't have that same reverence for a Bible, but in the Catholic Mass, the priest still bends over and kisses a Bible or a holy book. With Jews, if a Torah scroll is damaged, a funeral is had and it is buried in the ground as if it were a person. So in the American war against Islam, its crusade against Islam, desecrating the Quran, it features prominently. Now, another extremely important element of Islam is the unification of prophet and king. In Islam, there is no separation of church and state. Once again, going back to the figure of the founder, the prophet. He was both a prophet, receiving messages from God, a spiritual, religious role, and he was a king, leading armies, conquering his enemies, expanding the scope of Islam. The Quran tells us very carefully what kind of foods are permitted, what kinds of foods are forbidden, how a man should dress, how a man should cut his beard, how you should do banking, how you should marry, how you should divorce, how you should raise children, how you should go to the bathroom. All of these are clearly stated in the Quran and subsequent theological books. Now, this is very different from the Christian Bible. Jesus didn't tell us what we should wear, what we should eat, how we should bathe, how we should cut our beards. If a woman should cover her hair or how she should wash herself after having her period. But Islam was very much similar to Judaism, Confucianism, Hinduism of the time, meaning it was both a religion and a political system. Jesus very clearly tried to shatter the unity of church and state. Render to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. Very clear in Matthew. And Jesus said again in John, my kingdom is not of this world. I did not come here to build governments, to tell people how to do banking and what food to wear. That is not my goal. My kingdom is not from here. My kingdom is a spiritual kingdom. So Islam drew very heavily on Judaism and totally rejected the Christian separation of church and state, which is so important for the United States, which is a big problem when Muslims migrate to another country like United States, which has separation of church and state. It would be considered heretical to a Muslim. Now, the ideal ruler was, of course, the Prophet Muhammad, who died in 632. He was both a religious leader, leading prayers, setting up a religion, receiving divine revelations, and he was a religious leader, picking up his sword, invading Mecca, defeating his enemies, and spreading the message both by missionaries and by the sword. After he died in 632, there were four what we call the rightly guided caliphs. Caliph were the leaders of Islamic world, both religious leader and political leader. Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and Ali were the ones accepted until today by all Muslims. Now, after the death or the murder of Ali in 661, there was a split because there was a debate who should be the next caliph. Well, two groups emerged. Sunni were in Saudi Arabia and most of the Middle East, and they started accepting, creating another line of caliphs. The Shia Muslims, or Shiites, which were predominantly in modern day Iraq and Persia, broke away from the Sunni movement and had their own hierarchy of caliphs. And there were various wars between them, various empires, and various lines of caliphs. Some of them are the Umayyads, which followed after Ali, Abbasids in the Middle East, the Fatimids in Egypt, Mughals over in India and Pakistan. By the 16th century to 20th century, the Ottomans in Turkey had taken over the Middle East, and the new caliph was in Istanbul. In Africa, there were various caliphs who emerged and claimed to rule, such as Sokoto in northern Nigeria. The Spanish branch of Islam set up a group of caliphs claiming to be the correct heirs of the Prophet Muhammad. But very important is to remember the caliph is both a religious leader and a spiritual, religious and spiritual, and a political and military leader. So the caliph could pronounce on issues of religion and then put down the Quran and pick up his sword and lead an army in battle. In the West, we had the tradition of kings and emperors and czars and kaisers, but we also had the Pope. And so there was the traditional in Western Europe, the separation of church and state. The last caliph was Caliph Abdulmecid II, and he ruled from the Ottoman Empire. The capital was Istanbul, the old city of Constantinople. Well, after World War I, Turkey lost the war. There was a revolution, and Abdulmecid II was removed and sent into exile. So by 1924, the post of caliph had been abolished. Now, this was largely pressure from the new secular anti-Muslim government in Turkey, of Ataturk, with major pressure from France and Great Britain. The reason was France and Great Britain were eager to carve up the Ottoman Empire, and they didn't want a caliph sitting somewhere to represent the unity of the Muslim world. The French were taking Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia. The Italians grabbed Libya. The British took Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Palestine and Iraq. The French took Syria and Lebanon. And so the Europeans wanted to carve up the Muslim world, everybody taking their colony. Even the United States got into it when we seized the Philippines. The southern part of Philippines is predominantly Muslim. And so the effort was to carve up the Islamic world, get rid of even a very weak caliph as a symbol of the unity of the Muslim world, and carve up their empire. Well, the Muslims have never forgotten that at one time they were a great empire. And they ruled from Indonesia to Morocco and from the heart of Russia down to Nigeria. A great nation. Now, in Islam, they call the nation the Ummah. We have the African American movement in the United States, the Nation of Islam, saying that Islam is not just a religion like the Catholic Church or the Methodist, but it is an empire like the United States or Russia or China or Brazil. So it is a political and a religious entity. And until today, the Muslims hearken back to the golden age when there was a caliph who ruled over the Muslim world, was a powerful empire, which was then gradually destroyed through internal wars, corruption, and finally European and American domination, carving it up into little independent countries, abolishing the caliphate. Well, even after the last of the rightly guided caliphs, Islam continued to expand. Even though there were rival caliphs, there were wars between Sunnis and Shiites, the dynamism of the Muslim empire continued to spread. Spain was conquered and a rival caliphate was set up. Persia expanded over into India, and you had the great Mughal Empire in India. Mughal Muslim Empire was responsible for building the Taj Mahal, which you see at the bottom left, a celebration of Islamic art and architecture in the heart of India, which remained predominantly Hindu. The bottom on the right, we see South Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, typical palatial Islamic architecture. So Islam continued to expand even after the death of the Prophet and the rightly guided caliphs, and in spite of internal wars, internal corruption, the rise of the Turks, the defeat of Spain, but still it remained a dynamic missionary movement. And it is still the same today, with Muslim missionaries spreading into Africa, up into Europe, and especially migration. Suddenly you have large Muslim communities in a place like France, where approximately 10% of the population of France is now Muslim. And of course, Islam adapted to every different climate. At the upper left, we see a typical adobe mosque built in Mali and Senegal and Chad. Below that, we see a Chinese mosque with a sort of a residual dome at the top, but the building itself is very Chinese in orientation. On the right, we see a very modern style architecture from Central Asia. Below that, we see a typical Turkish or Bulgarian or Albanian or Serbian mosque with the pointed minaret tower, but all containing the requisite dome and minaret to call people to prayer. Now, central to Islam is, of course, Sharia. Islam is more than just a religion where you go to church on Sunday and then you do what you want to all week long. Islam claims to be a civilization, regulating every aspect of life. Now, religion as civilization is very deeply rooted in every religion. On the right, you see the Code of Canon Law. These are the law books written by the Catholic Church regulating divorce, marriage, adoption, how funerals should be dealt with. So a lot of the activities of daily life are still influenced by religion. The Halakha is the law of Judaism, how you should cut your hair, what you can do on the Sabbath, what you can eat. Think of all kinds of new things which come up, which the religion has to confront. The Torah says you can't make fire on the Sabbath. What does that mean? I can't use my microwave or I can't use a phone. There's no fire there. Well, the rabbis had to decide. The picture in the middle, we see the Pennsylvania Dutch who have taken Christianity and it once again regulates clothing, food, how you live your life, how you even farm your land. Beside that, we see the pyramid of Hinduism, regulating society. The Brahmins at the top, everybody knows their place, what kind of job you have, what temple you pray at, what rituals you perform, what your laws of marriage. Below that, you see Confucianism. Once again, a blueprint for a perfect society here on earth. This is what the Sharia is. Sacred land and holy city, Mecca, Medina, the sacred cities in the sacred land of Arabia. Holy nation. Muslims consider themselves a nation, a people of Islam. Of course, it's open. Anybody can convert, anybody can join. Food, we have halal food, what to wear, beards, women's head covering, obligatory pilgrimage to Mecca. Every aspect of family law, divorce, sex, and inheritance is covered by Sharia. How to do banking, political leadership, sacred language. You don't translate the Quran into English and say your prayers in English, only in the sacred language of Arabic. Prayer 5 times a day. So Sharia regulates every aspect of life, which is unlike Christianity. You can wear what you want. You can eat what you want. There's no required pilgrimage. You can have your hair done any way you want to. Jesus wasn't concerned with matters of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. Leave that up to Caesar. Women, of course, are to dress modestly. Now, whether that means the burqa, as you see in the left, where everything is covered, or the face can be uncovered, what you're not going to see are women flashing cleavage and mini skirts up to their, up to their belt. They're not, it is modest dress. Now, the 5 pillars of Islam. This is the theology part. What are the 5 pillars? Now, we all know what a pillar is. This is what holds a building up. 5 pillars of a building. Well, the famous 5 pillars of Islam are accepted by all Muslims. Whether they are the American branch, the Nation of Islam, African Americans, or African Muslims, the Murtids in Senegal, the Shiites in Iran, the Sunnis in Arabia, all Muslims accept the 5 pillars. The first is Shahada, which is basically the phrase, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Once again, clear statement of monotheism. There is only one God, and Muhammad is his prophet or his messenger. Now, when you recite this statement, then you are a Muslim. That's all that it is. You don't have to be baptized. There's nothing else required. After that, everything else is just secondary. For man, you have to be circumcised. For woman, you start dressing modestly. But this is the statement of faith. That's all there is. Now, every religion has a statement of faith, what you have to believe. Christians are very elaborate, called the various creeds, the Nicene Creed, stating the relationship between the 3 gods, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, and what they believe, promises of an afterlife, all of that. Whereas in Islam, It is simply a statement of there is but one God and Muhammad is his messenger. Second pillar are 5 daily times of prayer. Now, these prayers are really very short. They don't have to be done in a mosque. They can be done anywhere. Here you see a man just taking his little prayer carpet, putting it down, facing Mecca and Medina, which, if you live in New York, is basically southeast. If you live in China, it is southwest. So it's not facing east, it is facing Mecca and Medina. If you live in Russia, you're going to face south. If you live in Australia, you're going to face northeast. So the 5 times of prayer. Now, this is important. I remember I was in a taxi going from Egypt and from Cairo to the airport, and suddenly it was prayer time. And I'm worried if the traffic is going to be bad, I'm going to miss my flight and all of that. Suddenly, the driver just pulls over, as almost everybody else did, took out his prayer mat, got down on the ground, saw the direction of Mecca, and said his prayer. And I'm sitting there thinking, am I going to miss my flight? Well, the prayers are relatively short. They are not long, drawn out things. They are prescribed. They are memorized. This is no spontaneous prayer. It is reciting prayers already written in the Quran. Now, the Sabbath, which begins Friday evening and lasts Saturday until Saturday evening, is very similar to the Jewish prayer times. The prayers begin at sunset. Well, in the middle of winter, sunset is a totally different time as it is in the summer. And so sunset, as the person goes around the world, occurs at a different time. So basically, it is sunset at some place on the face of the earth every minute. And so in front of every mosque, like in every synagogue, you will see a prayer tablet saying, when does the Sabbath begin today? Or when does it end tomorrow? What are the correct times of prayer? So here again, this is a very prominent feature in every mosque. When you go into a mosque, you're not going to see statues or paintings, but you're going to see clocks everywhere. You're going to see maps everywhere. You're going to see timetables, computerized, such as we see in the upper left, indicating when is the correct time for prayer that particular day in that particular city. The third pillar is fasting. Here again, this is during the period of Ramadan. And of course, when the day begins and when the day ends, what you're allowed to do at a particular time is very rigidly defined by the Quran. Once again, commemorating the first revelation to the Prophet Muhammad. The fourth pillar is zakat. Now, this is very often translated as charity, but it is not charity at all. Charity is when I give a quarter to a guy playing a guitar in the subway, or I give a cup of coffee to some poor guy sitting on a park bench in Central Park. That is charity out of my own good heart. Zakat, on the other hand, is an obligatory tax. 2.5% of your income is required donation to the Islamic community. This is a tax on the Ummah. So whether I live in New York or Jakarta or South Africa, I have an obligation, a financial obligation, to help Muslims in other places. For example, immigrants. They migrate to a new country. They have difficulty. They encounter persecution, racism, religious discrimination. Many countries forbid building mosques. Switzerland has a law forbidding them to build minarets. In many countries, mosques are being systematically dynamited, as in Burma and southern Thailand as we speak. In China, vicious persecution of Muslims. And so, where Muslims are being persecuted, this money goes to help them. A lot of the zakat contributed in the United States goes to the Palestinians, either the refugees expelled or fled from their country and not permitted to return, or the Palestinians still living under Israeli occupation. The Israelis dynamite houses or a town or clean out a Muslim neighborhood in Jerusalem. Well, the zakat is used to help them relocate, help them survive in a period of persecution. Disaster relief. There's a tsunami that hits Bangladesh or Pakistan or a Muslim area in Africa where there is drought. Zakat helps them. War victims, the persecution of Muslims in Bosnia and in Kosovo under the Serbs, widows whose husbands are either in jail or killed in Thailand or Afghanistan or Iraq. So when you go into a mosque, at the door, you will see two big boxes. One is marked charity, give what you want. The other one is marked zakat. And there you are required to give 2.5%. Now, the only Christian religion which really takes what we call tithing in Christian circles very, very seriously are the Mormons, where they are required to fill out state income tax papers, federal income tax papers, and Mormon income tax papers. Many Christian churches practice tithing and leave it up to the individual. But this is a financial contribution to help the Nation of Islam. Christians do it when they give to charity or to the Pope, but it is still considered charity. It is not obligatory according to the Bible or Christian teaching. Pilgrimage, the Great Hajj, is a requirement on all Muslims, if at all possible. And it is a pilgrimage to the sacred city of Mecca and the city of the Prophet. And this is a major sign of devotion, but it is also a requirement. Now, Christians, Catholics especially, have a tradition of pilgrimage, going around to sacred places such as Rome or Saint Jacques de Compostelle or Jerusalem or Bethlehem. But this is a tradition. In Islam, it is required. It is obligatory. Now, there is the Hajj, which is the major obligatory pilgrimage. But even if you go on your own and another time or a second or third time, this is called the Umrah, which is the lesser one, which is not obligatory, but is a sign of piety. And that is required according to the Quran. Now, this also gives rise to a big business. As here you can see, your agency presents everything you need to know about the Hajj, 7-night packages, 4 nights in Medina, 3 nights in Mecca. You can also upgrade it to the 14-night package. And this is a big event in Islam. Very often, if there's an old man who hasn't made it and has struggled his whole life, the family, the town, or even pious Muslims will donate money to send him and his wife on pilgrimage. So it is not just a tradition, but it is an obligation. very famous pilgrimage was the great king of Mali in the middle of Black Africa, today's Mali and Chad and Senegal. Mansa Musa, who ruled from 1280. Here we see a map published in Europe showing Mansa Musa holding up his ingot of gold crown, because his kingdom controlled the main gold mines of the middle of Africa. Well, he and Mali is famous for the famous adobe brick mosques. And here you see one very typical to Mecca. Well, he went on pilgrimage to Mecca, really blowing the world apart to see a great Black African Muslim king going to Mecca. Now, to wrap it up, Islamic world today and tomorrow. Here again, this map shows us the location of most Muslims today. See the dark blue, Somalia, Turkey, Morocco, over to Pakistan, where the population is 90 or more percent. The green area, deep into the heart of Africa, up into Central Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, the southern Philippines, and Bangladesh, 50 to 90. The yellow areas are Muslim areas up to 50%. We see the Uyghur area in China, where the Muslims are being persecuted. India, under the BJP, a vicious anti-Muslim movement. We see Israel, where probably the Muslim population is about equal to the Jewish population, with the Israeli expansion into Gaza and the West Bank and Golan Heights, but major problems for the Muslims. Up into Europe, you see former Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, and Albania, very heavy Muslim presence. So this is the Muslim world today. Islam and Catholicism are the two largest world religions, approximately equal in population. Well, the Muslim world has never forgotten the abolition of the caliphate and the European colonial expansion. Russia, the purple area, expanded down into Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, ruling over hundreds of millions of Muslims under the Tsar and then under the communists with vicious persecution of Islam. England took over the dark blue, the pink area from Egypt, Sudan, down to South Africa, Pakistan, India, Burma, Malaysia, again, flooding the countries with Christian missionaries, Nigeria, where missionaries converted the whole southern half of the country. Palestine, encouraging Jewish immigration and the expulsion of the Muslim population, going back to the English occupation of Palestine. France did the same. Third of Africa, Madagascar, once again, flooding the country with Christian missionaries, French language schools, and carving up the Muslim empire even further. And in China, we see the western province of China, the Uyghur area, still under vicious Chinese communist occupation. There are many countries today which are struggling between the clash of Islam and Christianity. We see Islam in Ethiopia, the dark green area, Afar and Somalia, are 90% Muslim. The paler green areas are about half Muslim. The areas in the north, Tigray and Amhara, are Orthodox Christian. So Ethiopia today is about half Muslim and half Christian, constantly at war, trying to carve the country into a Muslim half and a Christian half. Beside that, we see Sudan. The southern half, South Sudan, just broke away from Sudan of Khartoum. Sudan on the map is overwhelmingly Muslim. South Sudan is predominantly Christian or animist. Below that, you see Nigeria. The northern half is Muslim. The southern half is Christian or animist. The new capital, Abuja, is built on the border, trying to reconcile Islam and Christianity, which seems to be a losing battle. The map shows the downward spread growth of Islam and the upper growth of Christianity. So when Muslims look at the world, they see themselves as the victims of European and American imperialism, missionaries, westernization. As we speak at the end of December in 2020, we're moving into the Christmas season. Banning Christmas is part of the Muslim campaign to preserve Islam in the face of vicious Western and Christian aggression. In fact, one person has described Christmas as a tinsel-covered Trojan horse. Put up a Christmas tree and give the kids presents. Well, what's next? It is Christmas. Christian missionaries singing Silent Night, Holy Night, wanting statues of baby Jesus. So the Muslim world views itself as being under siege by Christianity and the Western world. Whether it was the carving up of the Islamic world between France and Britain and Russia and China, or it is the cultural influence of missionaries spreading Western languages. This is a battleground. Today, the situation is changing very rapidly. Two phenomenon. You still have non-Muslim occupation of huge Muslim populations. And the newspapers today in Myanmar, the Burma, the Rohingya Muslim population was brutally expelled. Thousands were murdered, and they were not allowed to return to their country. Southern Thailand, predominantly Muslim, the Buddhist government in Bangkok sending in missionaries, building giant statues of the Buddha, trying to restrict the freedom of the Muslims. In Russia, the Caucasus region still has millions of Muslims under Russian Christian occupation. In India, Kashmir, 200 million Muslims still occupied by a militant Hindu Indian state. In Palestine, there are 5 million Muslims in the state of Israel and all the occupied territories, and 13 million Muslims in Israel, Palestine, and the diaspora, one of the most persecuted Muslim populations in the world. In China, the Uyghur population of Western China is now concentration camps, re-education by the Chinese. The USA has 4 million Muslims. Well, Donald Trump has stopped Muslim immigration and is doing everything he can to get rid of them. As I speak, Donald Trump has just lost the election and President Biden is going to come in. But still, there is a very deeply rooted anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States. Well, most of the Muslims in the United States, with the exception of the Nation of Islam, the African American movement, most of them are immigrants, largely from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, to a less extent, the Arab countries. But Muslim migration is also radically changing the face of the Islamic world. When you look at the populations, France varies between 10 and 20% of the population is Muslim. Large numbers of Christian converts to Islam and Muslim migration from North Africa. Germany, huge numbers of Muslims, predominantly from Turkey and to an extent from Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. Other countries, Sweden, Norway, other countries are having a growing population. Now, this map shows Muslims in the European community, Norway and Switzerland, projected in the year 2050. Well, we are in 2021. And as I speak, almost every day on the news, you see boats full of migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to Spain, to Italy, to Greece, going into Turkey and trying to get across into Europe. This is a major issue for Europe because Europe is very wealthy and affluent, but in Africa, you are in the Middle East, you're waging wars. The collapse of Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq are all failed states with millions of Muslims fleeing to the closest safe harbor is Europe. Droughts in Africa, Senegal, Mali, Chad, not only wars, but also ecological disaster, forcing millions of African Muslims to flee to the north. Now, the Europeans are not happy with this, but it is, as this map predicts, a growing situation. Can you imagine when 20%, 30% of the projected population of Sweden in 2050 is going to be Muslim, meaning 1/3 of the country will be Muslim. So this is a major issue confronting the world today. Growing Muslim population in Europe. Well, they are going to be eager to help their persecuted brothers and sisters in other countries, such as China, Palestine, India, Russia, Thailand, and Burma. And we see that phenomenon today. Young Muslims volunteering to go and to fight to defend the Palestinians or the Kashmiris or the Uyghurs. This is a major political issue in the world today. Countries are not happy with the inflow of Muslims, even if it's a country like the United States, which is responsible for the collapse of Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, still, we destroyed these countries, but we don't want to accept their refugees. So Donald Trump's Muslim ban. Now, migration to the United States took off in 1965. Gates of immigration, which had been closed in 1924, suddenly opened again. And millions of Chinese, of Mexicans, of Muslims flooded into the country, giving rise to neighborhoods like I live in the middle of Queens, where there are Buddhist temples, mosques, African neighborhoods, Korean neighborhoods, all over Queens. And so Muslim migration is causing a lot of alarm. So when Donald Trump says, "Make America Great Again," he means turn the clock back to before 1965, when America was a white Christian country. Famous book, Londonistan, saying that London is becoming a Muslim republic. Now, Muslims are not just migrating to Europe and the United States. Huge population migrating to Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. When I go to Mexico, there's a huge growing Muslim population. In fact, the richest man in Mexico is today the descendant of a Lebanese immigrant. The richest man in Brazil is a descendant of a Syrian immigrant. So Carlos Slim, you'd never believe that he was a Lebanese who migrated to Mexico and today is the most powerful and wealthiest man in Mexico. So the Muslims are bringing businesses. They are, in many ways, very aggressive and successful business people. Well, the complexity of Muslim-Christian relations continues. The rise of the Islamic State, which Donald Trump persecuted ruthlessly, once again attempted to reunite the shattered body of the Muslim world, restore the caliphate after its abolition by Turkey, France, and Great Britain in 1924. Restore the greatness of Islam. The Iraq War, which resulted from 9/11, a Muslim attack on the heartland of the United States, something that Hitler and Stalin could only dream of accomplishing. A direct attack on an American major city was achieved by Osama bin Laden. Once again, this is the war between the United States and Islam. The United States responded by invading Iraq, overthrowing Saddam Hussein, waterboarding, torture, mass murder. United States vicious support of Israel, expansion into the West Bank. See the map in the middle. Those little brown areas are all surrounded by giant stone walls and machine guns, where all the Palestinians are dumped into, cross between a concentration camp and an American Indian reservation, Jordan Valley being cleaned out, East Jerusalem being cleaned out. I mean, definitely war of religions. Afghanistan, once again, the ongoing war, America's longest war. So the Islamic world is not sitting still. It has not forgotten the horrendous crimes carried out by so many European countries, the United States, and today Russia, China, Israel. They have never forgotten that they were once a great empire and they seek to return. And they have never forgotten that the internal problems of Islam are probably equally devastating as were the external problems. Rival caliphs, internal wars, the split between Shia and Sunni, the corrupt kings of Saudi Arabia, the Persian Gulf, Dubai, Jordan, Morocco, who use Islam to keep themselves in power, but which are corrupt to the core. Dictators such as in Egypt, ruling with an iron fist, causing more damage than they cause good. So the state of the Muslim world is in chaos, internal corruption, external aggression. But the Muslims are going to be and remain a major factor in the future. How long can Israel keep its millions of Palestinians in slavery and under occupation? How long can dictators in Egypt, absolute monarchs in Saudi Arabia and Morocco keep in power? This is an issue facing the 21st century. Samuel P. Huntington, in his famous book, The Clash of Civilizations, my old professor at Harvard, predicted that the 21st century was going to be an age of religious warfare. You see the Muslim world struggling to get united, get organized, overcome the dictators and kings and foreign domination, and emerge as a major world power. China is merging under its Confucianist ideology and religion. Hinduism in India under the BJP, the Hindu National Party, viciously persecuting Christians and Muslims to make India Hindu again. The rise of militant Buddhism in Burma and Thailand, expelling millions of Muslims, suppressing Christian churches, and make Buddhism great again. Western Christianity, the link between Northern Europe, United States and Canada, and Western Europe with Australia and New Zealand thrown in, going through a evangelical Christian revival, where the United States is going to become a Christian republic under the ultra-right-wing evangelical Republicans and continuing influence of Donald Trump. So John L. Esposito's great book, with an introduction by another of my Harvard professors, Karen Armstrong, The Future of Islam. Where is Islam going? What is going to be the future of Islam in this cataclysmic clash of civilizations? Don't forget, countries like Pakistan already have the atomic bomb. Israel has the atomic bomb, a stockpile in the very heart of the Muslim world. Iran is in the process of developing its own atomic bombs to counter those of Israel and the American bombs in the Persian Gulf. So the 21st century is going to be a wild ride. And I won't even try to imagine the third millennium. So, on that ominous note, I would say thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you sometime in the future. There's me standing on one of the pyramids in Egypt, back when I was in my 20s, I guess. On the right is me in a mosque, in front of a mosque near my neighborhood in Queens. So feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or comments, ronbrownmedia@gmail.com. And I definitely hope to see you sometime in the near future. So thank you very, very much. And I look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye. This is Ron Brown signing off.